Welcome back, nerds. Fino here. So you've gone and done it. Blew your coin sky of funds on Tam Lin Lancelot, huh? Well, that's a problem for future you. But now that you've gone and committed yourself to the Melico lifestyle, congrats. You now have one of FGO's more interesting servants, at least in mechanical terms. As a quick refresher, Tam Lin Lancelot, aka Melusine, is a 5-star Lancer introduced in Lost Belt 6, Avalon Le Fay. I was going to maintain kayfabe on this one, but I realized that her second ascension literally reveals her other name, regardless of your story progress. Unlike the other Fairy Knights, Melusine is a limited servant, and opportunities to get her come only once in a while. I have a video on the subject if you want to plan ahead, but while you're here, let me tell you something. If nothing else, remember this. Keep Tam Lin Lancelot in her first or second form. Doesn't matter which. It could even be their masked variants once they're unlocked. You could do this by going into the Spirit Origin menu or long pressing her on the party menu, then going on to character skin. If you're a Philistine, you can stop there, but otherwise I'd recommend changing the options in the status tab to match. Remember, long press, not mating press. That's for later. It'll all make sense in due time, just trust me for now. In her first two forms, Melusine's Noble Phantasm manifests as Innocence Erendite. This is a single target arts attack. Its most useful property is its overcharge effect, which preemptively increases Melusine's NP gain for 3 turns, meaning your reward for using it is to cycle it even more efficiently. As part of its consistent effects, it also applies a 1k flat damage amp and dumps out 10 stars. Melusine's status as a single target arts lancer is actually huge because it's an extremely limited pool. There are only 3 as of this recording. One is Li Shuwen, who hits hard but suffers from only having 1-turn effects. Between that and his story locked status, I don't consider him a practical option. Meluco's big competitor then is Nagao Kagetora, a welfare servant. If you missed getting her back in Gura Gura Final Hanoji or its rerun, then Meluco is really the only game in town. Despite an extremely generous hit count on her Noble Phantasm, Kagetora suffers from having her arts and NP gain effect be single turn only. By contrast, Melico is better equipped to stay in the fight thanks to Innocence Erendite's stacking NP gain. Comparing them damage-wise, an NP5 Kagetora on her peak turn will output somewhere between an NP2 and NP3 Melico. However, that's only for the single turn that Kagetora has her arts buff. Once that expires, she's just down to her attack buff. So I'd ballpark the break even at around NP2, if you were thinking about getting another copy later on. Melusine has 2 skills that remain the same regardless of her ascension. The first of these is Dragon Heart. It's a 3-turn attack buff outputting a substantial 40%. It provides a tiny damage reduction effect and a 2k max health buff, which is effectively a heal. Not bad. But then there's the battery. 30% at max level, which is decent. In combination with her append, that's a total of 50%. As far as her arts build is concerned, that works just fine. Particularly in combination with the Arch Juggernaut Castoria, you can plug and play as you see fit. Melico's other consistent skill is Parry Dancer. It's a star dump with a pair of 3-turn effects. There's a huge absorption buff and a solid star regeneration effect. The absorption magnitude is a ridiculous 5,000%, which is like a berserker number. And at a 5-turn cooldown, it'll be up more often than not. Combined with the stars and NP gain buffs from Innocence Erendite, you can chain a ton of arts crits into additional Noble Phantasms, or, once Mighty Chains come out, cap your hands out with Melusine crits for consistent damage. Now what if I told you that on top of being the mightiest single target arts lancer, Melico goes even further beyond? That brings us to our third skill at last, Ray Horizon. On top of being a 1-turn invulnerability, it's a 100% battery. That kind of thing is usually reserved for casters, but Melusine just drops it on the table like it's nothing. What if I told you that, as far as her arts build is concerned, Ray Horizon is absolutely useless? That's because it forces Melusine into her third ascension. Once you pull the trigger, 2 parts of her kit radically change. The first is her Noble Phantasm. Innocence Erendite becomes Hollow Heart Albion, an AoE buster attack. It has preemptive Invuln Pierce and finishes with a burn. As it's overcharged, this NP has a 3-turn preemptive buster buff, so you can snowball off repeated uses. That said, spamming Hollow Heart Albion is a strategy locked largely in whale territory, so I'll save that for another day. Fun bit of trivia though, Melusine isn't the first servant to change her NP's damage category. That honor goes to Dr. Jekyll, whose Noble Phantasm changes from non-damaging to psychic damage. On you, the player, for being stupid enough to use him. The second change in Melusine's kit is to Ray Horizon, which loses its 100% battery in exchange for a multi-turn NP damage buff. Remember how I told you to keep Melico in her first or second ascensions? That's why. Even if you're gonna go with a pure buster build, having an immediate 100% battery is the kind of value that you can't pass up in 99% of situations. And just to make it abundantly clear, you get that full battery once per fight. It's a one-way street. If you push this button in an arts build, make sure you end the fight immediately. In boss fights, you may just have to keep her alive or get through an invuln, but be aware. One of the worst situations for Melusine is to end up in her buster form with your arts buffs coming off cooldown. Your Castorias and Jufus aren't going to be too happy to see a buster servant. You may also be reducing your damage by firing this off needlessly. Because of the difference between single target and AoE values, you're actually bleeding single target damage by swapping. So if there's a reason to focus on a single enemy, then you're better off waiting an extra turn or two just to keep your arts configuration. As far as teammates go, Melusine very much wants either double Castoria or Koyanskaya on her side, depending on your main card type for a given fight. As a free-to-play, I'll assume you can't double up, but you should be able to grab one through your friends list. As for filler, you've got some interesting options. Starting with the art side, Tam Lin Lancelot's 30% battery means you can pair it with a 20% charge support to hit 50%, filling the rest of your initial meter with either Castoria or a craft essence like Ocean Flyer. Absolutely make sure you grab that once the summer event rolls around. As far as 20%ers go, you've got Helena and Asclepius. Jufu gives 30 and she's generally the best of these low rarity enablers since she functions as a diet Castoria. Failing that, you can settle the charge issue yourself and lean on Paracelsus' buffs and offensive Noble Phantasm. A lot of the usual suspects that Percival would also turn to. Now Meliko changing from a single target to AoE does have interesting implications if you're trying to farm with her. She deals remarkably well with reverse funnel type encounters, where you fight single enemies early on and multiples in the final wave. Provided you can meet the refund requirement, a 1-1-X would hypothetically be ideal. But let's say you have something like a 3-1-3 or a 2-1-2 arrangement. That's when a Poorfriend player can incorporate someone like a Paracelsus to deal with the initial trash. And he's not the only game in town either. Depending on your opposition, you can also pick someone like Arash or Habitrot. These two have the advantage of removing themselves from the field after their big turn, letting you rotate in a fresh buffer. Things get a lot weirder on the low-end Buster side, but if you just need a team comp, there are actually a number of Lancers that synergize with Melusine if you're willing to put up with slow multi-attacker setups and other jank. Elizabeth Bathory has a double attack buff for female allies, Vanilla Romulus can fight off a weaker wave and then donate his Buster Guts combo, and Leonidas has a Buster buff of his own if you need someone to taunt up and take a dive. If your upfront charge needs are met, consider Anderson as a generic support. Along with the usual benefits like his charge and stars return combo, he's a good source of crit damage buffs. That's one of the things Melusine lacks in her own kit, and given how good she is at accessing stars, you should look out for ways to cash in. Command codes for instance. Crit damage codes would be my recommendation. Heaven Sent Kurama Child if you're around for Little Big Tengu, Shiogami Commander is coming this summer, Demon Vice Commander is also later this year and has an enmity component. Even for art builds, you can put it on one of your Buster cards, so that once you're forced into your AoE form late in a fight, you can use your low health to increase your damage. My final pick is Imperial Consort of the Heavenly Emperor. This benefits your Buster playstyle in particular since Hollowheart Albion spreads a burn. The burn itself doesn't contribute much to your damage, but this code amps your crit damage against burned enemies. As for craft essences, Melusine is partial to Black Grail for high-end usage, but I'm assuming you'll be taking her into messier fights. This means crit and Buster CEs are on the table. On this front, you have a nice selection of freebies. Sewing a beloved doll from Little Big Tengu, the Queen Priestess's Spare Moment is returning this year, and you'll have cranking once the Super Bunyan event comes around. Unfortunately, a lot of these have starting charge instead of extra depth on their other effects. Normally that's handy, but the way Ray Horizon works makes the crit Buster starting charge combo a lot less useful for Melusine. Finally, I'll note that Meliko is an excellent carrier of event damage CEs, so if yours is on the weaker side and especially if she's NP1, you should look for those to get your damage in line. A final note for newer players is that Melusine requires Bells of Absolution to reach the higher levels of her skills, and she needs a lot of them. Given how important her third and first skills are to her overall power, you'll need to procure a source of these. The Lost Belt 6 farming nodes won't be available until the chapter's full release, and they're out of reach for newbies anyway. Because of this, you should pick them up in event shops and the Pure Prism shop. Her dual-sided skill set will take some getting used to. Once you get the hang of it, you'll find that Melusine is a very powerful and versatile Lancer. And to see the upper end of her power, especially her Buster configuration, I'll be returning to her very soon. Training weights off. Thanks for watching. Like if you enjoyed this video, subscribe for more. If you want to see my gacha highlights, they're over on Fino and Friends. Link on the screen. I had one hell of a time pumping on Melusine, and it's a saga worth seeing. Catch you on the other side.